Hi, Facebook friends. Helen Archontou here, CEO of the YWCA of Northern New Jersey. Happy Tuesday. Hope everyone had a wonderful weekend, and I hope you're staying cool. It is definitely sweltering if you are in the New Jersey area. So hopefully you have water close by, some potential air conditioning, and if not, the phone numbers for places to stay, cooling centers and places to get help, otherwise. We are, as we talked about earlier this month on, various shows that we've done, we know that June is the time of year where we showcase and highlight Pride here internationally, nationally, New Jersey. And although, this is a conversation and this is work that, we're committed to year round, every day of the year, it's definitely an opportunity to highlight some, wonderful happenings, in our communities. And I happened to, a few weeks ago, be reading a paper online. I don't read the paper anymore, in print, but, and I saw this wonderful article about our guest today and the work that he has been doing in Montclair. And I thought it was a wonderful opportunity for us to elevate and, share the great work that he's doing. But at the same time, I'm hoping create models for communities as to what they can grow and offer in their own communities. And so with that, as we know, Pride occurs during the month of June specifically because this is the time when the Stonewall riots happened in 1969. And, we have seen a lot of efforts over the last few years and a lot, in the paper and a lot in our communities, a lot of conversations specifically around, flag raisings as being opportunities to help communities feel, more inclusive and welcoming, to everyone living in the communities. But those have been challenging for some communities to, even get the flag to be elevated. And that's why I thought what was happening here in Montclair was so unique and an evolution that it was great to lift up. So with that, I'd like to welcome Montclair Township's Councilor-at-Large, Peter Yacobellis, to YWTV this morning. And we're going to talk a little bit about how he advocates, supports, and builds awareness on behalf of the LGBTQ plus people in Montclair. His work expands way past the borders of Montclair, but he's done some tremendous work to for the community specifically for this past month. So welcome, Peter.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Helen, and all the staff I know making this happen on the back end too.
Yes, it is a small but mighty team. We could not do any of this without them for sure. So let me tell you folks at home a little bit about Peter. He, as I mentioned, is a Councilor-at-Large at Montclair Township. He also has a long history of advocacy on behalf of the LGBTQ community and equality work in this area, since personally experiencing both conversion therapy and being discharged from the U.S. Air Force under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. He has focused much of his life on fighting for justice. He has served as an advisor in volunteer and staff capacities to 2 governors, a presidential campaign, U.S. senators, nonprofits, and private companies. Today, he is the founder and president of Out Montclair. We have the links to Out Montclair for you in the comments and coming up on the screen. It is a charitable organization that's focused on educational and community events for LGBTQ plus people and their allies in the Montclair community. So again, welcome, Peter. Thank you for coming to talk to us. So much to cover, and what a nice article, that was done by NorthJersey.com to showcase your work. So
thank you.
Let's jump right in. So I know that you recently led the charge to enact sweeping legislation to advance LGBTQ equality in Montclair. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you pointed out with some of the, my history on a lot of these issues, and obviously, personally being openly gay, it's my lived experience, right? So part of, I think, running for office in the first place was certainly being open and transparent about, some of the things that I was going to try to do, the number one function of a municipal government is land use, right? And police powers, meaning law enforcement broadly. And number two is around the budget, right? So it's quite down the ladder in terms of, what the focus is typically of municipal government. But we are empowered to take certain actions at the local level to ensure how we spend our money. We have a $93 million budget, right? That's a lot of money pumping out into the local and regional economy. Our hiring practices, affecting, building codes and things like that in town, and health codes and all that. So we have a lot of ability to affect the experience of, marginalized groups, in particular, in this case, the LGBTQ plus community. And so having experienced so much of what you had already shared, it was important to me to come in to office and then start to really peel back the layers and look at, okay, what's been done historically and what could be done. And in Montclair, I think we have a very strong and solid reputation for being a welcoming community, and we do. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to move here in the first place. But when you actually dig into the policies and the laws, I felt we're pretty vulnerable to a change in government at any time, because the protections and the values that we talk about were not actually codified in law. So I set out with a few of my colleagues on the council to start to fix that, right? And make recommendations for what could be done at the administrative level. So things like updating the township's equal employment opportunity policy, hiring practices, where you post jobs, make sure we're posting in inclusive websites, making sure we're trying to recruit diverse talent, to affecting how we spend our dollars. So making sure we have a law on the books, which we now have, which passed last week unanimously, that any contracting that we do with any third parties, those third parties themselves have to have a non-discrimination clause on their own books. So we are not allowed to spend dollars with any company in New Jersey or elsewhere who themselves don't protect all people, LGBT, et cetera. So, and on the basis of gender identity and expression, in addition to sexual orientation, which was, I think, a pretty big deal. So that's, almost $100 million in spend that now has to be tied to the principle of equality and treating people equally under the law. I also thought, we should go a little further in Montclair and follow in the footsteps of what places like New York City and California, Maplewood, and a few other towns around New Jersey have done in terms of making our single-user bathrooms gender neutral. For a host of reasons. Some of it, I think, is just silly. It's silly for there to be a line outside the women's restroom when there's a free men's single-user restroom right there. And, why have that signage that makes it uncomfortable and complicated for people? But at the same time, we do have a non-binary community here, not just in Montclair, everywhere. And it's hundreds of people, and people don't realize that. And so, I hear stories constantly being in this community of people getting anxiety, not feeling safe, when they're looking at a binary choice, male or female, with the picture of the male, stick figure male, or the picture of the female with the dress on. What if you're identified as female and you don't wear dresses, right? What if, there's all sorts of folks in the spectrum who don't fit those two pictograms. And so I felt it was really important to push this piece too, knowing that the community would come along. And they have largely. I think, unfortunately, it was a really close vote on this particular item. And I think that's a reflection of our government being a little bit more conservative than the population overall. But I was confident that the business community and the community at large would come along, and they certainly have. There's been an outpouring of support for that law that we passed. And we gave businesses 6 months to change a sign, which is really not a long time, which is actually, I think, a long time if you think about it. And it's a nominal expense. It's a nominal cost. So I just thought all around it was the right thing to do. And then we went a little further in terms of also just affirming some state policies in terms of banning conversion therapy and making sure that our anti-discrimination practices in employment were codified in law, not just policy at the local level. Lastly, we're also working through, iterations and drafts of a broader anti-bullying ordinance, which would say that any township facing youth services and any entities, third parties that receive money from the township for youth services would have to have bullying prevention policies and bullying prevention training for employees on their books as well. So that's something that we'll continue to work on in the months ahead that I hope to be able to roll out and pass in 2022.
I really appreciate you sharing the detail around this, because part of my goal in terms of hosting you today is so that your counterparts in other communities can hear what you've done and push forward these to me just seem like obvious that these should just be policies in our government, and people may not even be assuming, right, that even if not codified, people are following these practices. But to your point, we can't just assume that, because we know that that everyone is not, and that this is a very big message, by passing these policies that you've done and the way that you've done it. So what are some, I know obviously you're talking about the bullying piece that you're working on.
Yeah.
What are some other policies that you would, like to consider and think about for the township for, over the next period of time, your next set that you'd like to look at?
So in terms of the LGBTQ community, I think it's definitely the anti-bullying piece, but also extending health benefits to any transgender workers or contractors with the township. So making sure they're receiving the kind of treatment that they need and are looking for. Something that, by the way, is pretty standard at the state level, and just something that we have to decide to opt into at the local level when we're choosing our health plan. So that's definitely something that I'm working with our HR department and our township manager and my colleagues on the council to try and see through. And then additionally, for me, it's also about the lived experience, the lived equality experience. It's one thing to have a flag flying over your town, which is amazing. It's another to make changes to law and policy. And then it's another to me to go further and make sure that the lived experience of people in town is a healthy and positive one. So to me, that looks like, making sure we are providing services to vulnerable populations that, I'll give you an example. LGBTQ youth do not feel comfortable generally seeking services from a house of worship. Many have been marginalized, like I was, from a house of worship, and it would be the last place that I would think to go to for support. So there's something to think about there in terms of like homeless services, counseling services, things that, these third parties tend to provide may feel exclusive to folks like me who have struggled with, our relationship with houses of worship in our lifetimes. That said, we have a lot of really wonderful houses of worship in Montclair too, that we know are doing a lot of really great work here. So it's thinking about that. It's thinking about what could we be doing differently or more for people living with HIV and AIDS, LGBTQ seniors, at-risk youth, people of color dealing with stigma. So there's a lot we can do. And not everything requires a government solution, which is why I wanted to, and I know you'll get into this, but why I wanted to start out Montclair. I really felt that, there is enough support in the community as well to start to tackle some of these challenges. So I'm excited to talk to you about some of that too. Yeah.
So, well, you brought us there, so let's go there. So let's talk about out Montclair. And I just, again, want to just reiterate, I'm so grateful that you're sharing the detail of even what your thoughts are going forward, because my hope is that, for our viewers, as I always share our hope is with YWTV is that it's an opportunity to spread a conversation. And so, I would invite, for those of you watching, invite your leaders in your community, send them the link to this so that they can hear what's happening and that they can think about integrating the policies and the practices, many of which is, Peter's saying everything doesn't have to be legislated, but, it's just about creating community, creating opportunities, and, raising, issues and getting feedback to, push forward, these rights, that should be in a place and having a good lived experience.
Yeah, and Helen, if I could just add too, like what I would say to folks too is don't be satisfied with just the pride flag flying over you, right? Ask your local government, do they, by law, prevent discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression in contracting and procurement? That's a big deal. That's a way to make sure your town is not spending money with any third parties who don't themselves do that. Check to make sure your township employment practices are up to date. Really look under the hood and challenge your elected officials. Like, don't let folks get away with just flying the flag. Because that's symbolic and it's a wonderful thing, but for governments to really have the backs of the LGBTQ community, some of these things have to be enacted for sure. So thanks.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate you saying that, because as I said, I feel like I've sat and been part and written letters for so many struggles in our communities to trying to get the flags even flown, in, is that a word actually? But anyway, it's to have them flying in different communities. And so we are seeing that happen more now, but there are still some communities that are, holding out on that issue. And so to those of you that live in those communities that are advocating and, pushing forward on those fights, again, it's important to continue to hold your elected officials accountable on these issues, and, know that the YWCA, and obviously you've got models and supporters, in the work that Peter's doing and a few others in the state, to be able to, for lack of a better word, keep you going, and provide whatever resources and support we can to help make that happen. So let's talk about out Montclair. I have a couple other things I want to ask you about, but let's talk about that since we went there. I mean, it's so exciting what you have accomplished in this month. I mean, did I read this right? Is it 14 events? How many events did you host this month?
Yeah, we finished our 14th event on Saturday night.
Congratulations. That's amazing for a first-time effort.
Thank you. A friend of mine said this is the best analogy. It was like opening up a Christmas tree store like the month before Christmas. We launched out Montclair formally in May, the month before Pride Month. And then, lo and behold, the community expected us to have a whole lot of things going on for Pride Month. So, but we really rallied. I have an amazing team of volunteers. I could not possibly have pulled this off without. And a lot of really great partners, just people coming forward across our arts sector, small businesses, colleagues in government, just so many people stepping up to say, how can I help? And so I'm really just proud of that, just the symbiotic nature of it, and how everyone was there to help each other and to help us be successful, and by extension, give the community safe spaces and enjoyable events to really celebrate Pride. So, this was really born out of a couple things. Obviously, like I said earlier, the thought about the lived experience for people in town, right? So creating an organization where the LGBTQ plus community and allies could come together, be subscribed to the same, updates, be on the same website and social channels to share information. We share a lot of critical resources, whether it's dealing with, health and HIV and AIDS prevention, or suicide prevention, or bullying. We share a whole host of those resources online. And, this for us was about really creating safe spaces for people, and in particular, youth, right? Because we do a good job, I think, with the schools in terms of having GSAs at the middle schools and at the high school, and even at the private school in town. But they actually don't all communicate with each other. There's no organization that brings them all together. So you may only have a handful of kids at each particular gay, straight alliance, or gender sexuality alliance, some schools will call it. And so this notion of bringing all these groups together too, under the banner of Out Montclair Teens, was a huge hit. So we had our first teen event Thursday of last week, and we had 37 LGBT or questioning kids show up this event, which was incredible. And we had the activities planned for them. They were able to make bracelets with said whatever they wanted to say, their names or their pronoun preferences. They shared pizza and soft drinks and talked and exchanged phone numbers and social media handles. And, it was what we hope is a spark for much longer and more sustained thing in terms of making sure there's a teen group in town to support each other. I didn't have that when I was growing up, right? I didn't even know, I didn't even come out of the closet until I was probably, 18, 19 years old. And so I can only imagine and be a little jealous of kids who are secure in knowing who they are and who they love early in life. And hats off and kudos to the parents supporting that. Because I could only, again, personally imagine, being in high school and being so sure and being confident to ask the boy I had a crush on to go to the prom. My gosh, it never occurred to me, right? So that, my lived experience growing up was not a really great one in that context. And one of the other things that it's important to us too is also on the flip side of that, think about our seniors. Mm-hmm. Gosh, if you're a senior in the LGBTQ community, you've now been through most of your life without any of these rights or protections. I mean, how heartbreaking is that to, not be able to marry the person you're with or that you love until the end of the end of your life, your twilight years, your golden years, or to have been through, horrible experiences, including surviving the AIDS crisis without a lot of support from governments back then. So we have a lot of things that we're focused on that we're really excited about. But the most important is to create community and educational events and opportunities for our businesses and for parents, allies, and educators.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, for our viewers, again, I really do encourage you to connect with outmontclair.org and see what they've done this, past month. And now, obviously they launched right before Pride, but this is just the beginning. You've got a hard act to follow after what you rolled out in June for sure. But I know that this is a year-round, commitment, obviously, in terms of your work and so much to jump into. And also, what social media platforms are you on as well, so we can have everyone follow you guys?
Sure. So right now we're on both Facebook and Instagram, just Out Montclair on both.
Great. Good. Yep. So make sure you're following them. And also, as I always say this, our nonprofit communities only survive because of the resources that come from those of you out there that, believe in us and support us. And, an organization like this that is really grassroots and working in the community, that your dollars are turning right over, and your time, your resources that you can provide, whether it's something in kind, whether it's volunteering, or whether it's a check that you can write. It's going to go right to programming, boots on the ground. So please consider supporting, Out Montclair, the work that they're doing. As I can speak as a seasoned nonprofit person from my years of experience, launching a nonprofit is critical. The first year, especially, in terms of its, centering and growth. And this is the time now and ongoing that they really need your help. So please, think about getting involved. And I'd also say you don't have to be from Montclair to get involved. It's a great opportunity. Again, this is, what I loved about bringing this story today, for you to think about how to create something similar in your own community. We had a few weeks ago, we had Anthony Torres and Jeremy Lenson talking about the resource center that they're looking to build for Bergen County. To Peter's comments, imagine growing up in a space, in a time when, you have resources and community available to you, and support all the way through. So, Peter, I want to thank you again for talking to us about locally what's going on. We like to activate our viewers about what else they should be thinking about in terms of, supporting, our community. What on the national level right now are issues that people should be plugged into and writing to their representatives to get involved in?
Yeah, so on the national level, for sure, is the Equality Act, at the congressional level. So it's passed multiple times at the House, including in this most recent Congress, but is on the list of many, many things that are stuck in the Senate. And so the Equality Act would bring equal rights fully to the LGBTQ community across employment and housing and health services and just a whole bunch of really important areas that it doesn't exist. And, I think the community and many allies probably moved on after marriage equality, thinking that was the pinnacle, that was the big victory. But again, thinking about the lived experience, the day-to-day experience that people have in terms of discrimination in all those areas I just enumerated is a really big deal. So pushing our members of Congress to support and pass the Equality Act is probably the biggest thing we can do locally. And then just paying attention to what's happening nationally. This has become an issue again, Many of you might remember 2004 when Karl Rove and the Bush administration were running for re-election, and they decided to put same-sex marriage bans on as constitutional amendments on ballots across the country as a means of driving voter turnout. And we see that happening similarly again with the targeting and the marginalization of the trans community, particularly trans youth, in states all across the country. So if you just simply Google trans youth and Arkansas or Alaska or other places, you'll see some pretty horrifying things that are happening. And so if you've got capacity beyond just reaching out to your own local officials, I would encourage folks to look at how you can be supportive for state organizations, local organizations on the ground in places where pretty bad, pretty significant discrimination is happening today in real time against a vulnerable population.
Well, thank you for putting that on our to-do list. And viewers, please, make note. And, as I always say, as you know, the YWCA does a lot of work around getting out the vote, but it doesn't end there. Once you put them in office, they work for us. Whether or not you voted for them, they do work for us. And you have to keep telling them what you want them to do so that they are representing your value system and not theirs. So please, and hopefully they're aligned, but it's important to keep communicating that. So I encourage our viewers to make note and to reach out. Thank you for letting us, putting the perspective on that for us, Peter. So as we close out our time together, I just wondered, thinking about youth today that are in that space of still coming out, what message do you have for them? I mean, obviously you've been through your own personal journey, which obviously has formed and informed so much of your present day work. But as you stand, your present day self looking back, what's a message to youth that, may be in some of the spaces that you were then?
Sure. I think the best message, or I hope this is received, is look for validation inside, not outside. Your core convictions, that feeling that you feel in your gut is your guide. Don't look for validation externally. Take it from somebody who looked for validation from the military, looked for validation from the church, looked for validation from family, friends, high school, and could not find it where and when I needed it. So I really feel strongly that, if I can go back and teach my younger self something, it would be to listen to that voice inside of me that was telling me, who I was and what I want, and to be my authentic self sooner than later.
And what's a message to allies, those who want to stand up? What's important for them to know? Yeah,
I'd say what's important again is that these issues don't ever seem to go away. Discrimination is almost like a game of whack-a-mole. There's always ugliness, directed at a new group. I mean, just this year, we've talked about the rise in anti-Semitism and the targeting of the Asian American Pacific Islander community. Obviously, all the heinous violence and discrimination against the African American community. So it never seems to go away. It always seems to find a new target and a new home. And in particular, trans people, I would say, are at the top of that list. The life expectancy for an African American trans woman in America is mid-30s. So people are being targeted, they're being beaten, they're being murdered for who they are. So please, 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 this fight for equality is not over by any means. Yes, we've secured marriage equality. Yes, we've had some big wins and the movement has moved fast, but there's a lot of catching up to do. People still do not believe that we have the right to exist, that we have the right to love who we naturally love. And that we're made, in God's image. People still are, opposed to that and feel that we are living a life of sin. And I think that's a shame. Yeah. Love is love.
Well, thank you for that. And, just a reminder for our viewers, our sexual violence program, Healing Space, which is part of the YWCA of Northern New Jersey. It's a state designated program from Bergen County, and there's one in every county in the state. We know that sexual violence in the transgender community has been rising off the charts as well. And we are here for you to support you. So please feel free to call our 24-hour hotline at 201-487-2227 or download the Healing Space app, and you can have a free text to chat, support to get, resources if you've been impacted by sexual violence. So Peter, thank you so much for your time today. This was such a great conversation, and I appreciate you modeling what towns could be doing and should be thinking about. And for those of us that are, your average citizen who do not have an elected seat like Peter does, you still have the power to bring this conversation to your elected officials and ask them to move forward on, any or all of these items, that we've talked about. We encourage you to stay plugged in to Out Montclair and see what they're doing. And again, join in and support, as well as think about modeling it in your community as well. Thank you so much, Peter. I look forward to your work, continuing to grow, and thank you for creating and keeping safe spaces, as being a priority for, all in your community.
Absolutely. Thank you, Helen. And thanks again, everybody at the YWCA. I appreciate being part of this. Thanks.
Thank you. And for our viewers, again, please be part of sharing this conversation. Something you heard today, we encourage you to integrate it into a message or an email to someone, a conversation with someone. You can share the link of this broadcast very easily through Messenger, post it to your Facebook page, text it to somebody that you think should hear it and see it. This is a great opportunity, and that's part of being an ally. For those of us, that want to be supportive, is helping elevate the conversation and expand it. And we will be back with more YWTV this week. As you know, on Thursdays, we have been sharing the mic now with Black women in our community to elevate their voices. So we look forward to you joining us on Thursday for another great conversation, as well as stay connected to see the other shows we have planned for you. And with that, we're going to drop some links to some upcoming programs for all of you that we hope that you join us, whether it's summer camp registration, our Girls Leadership Academy, that's a 10-month opportunity that kicks off in the fall, our senior fitness and wellness initiatives that are virtual to help seniors that are homebound keep fit and well. And we always also encourage everyone to do our 21-day Racial Equity and Social Justice Challenge. You can sign up, and for 21 days get an email that will speak to you about race, power, and privilege, and help create a baseline understanding. We should get the whole township of Montclair doing that, Peter, the 21-day race challenge. We should partner on that. We have a couple of communities. Actually, the mayor in Ordell just launched the entire community doing the 21-day challenge across their community. It's a great way to just educate people on what they need to learn and unlearn.
Absolutely.
So, all right, everyone, stay cool. Have a great day. Thanks for spending some time with us. And Peter, be well and keep fighting the good fight. We're here to stand with you and support.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Be well.